If we mess this up, we lose the contract, Jenna murmured beside me. I didn't answer. Just circled a mistranslated phrase on slide 16 and drew a line under a state that was 3 months out of date. My red pen moved automatically, even though my hand felt like it had been glued to it for days. We were 6 hours out from the pitch. The conference room reeked of stale coffee, expo markers, and stress. I could feel it clinging to my skin. I'd barely slept in 4 days. Running numbers, refining language, tweaking the presentation until every slide spoke fluently, not just in English, but in respect. Respect for the culture, for the client, for the stakes. Because the client wasn't just any client. It was Daesung Group, South Korea's third largest industrial conglomerate. If we won this, we'd unlock an entire region, a whole portfolio of expansion. I'd spent 11 months building this pitch. Every line of that deck carried a fingerprint. Mine. And I understood Daesung. I'd lived in Seoul, back when I was still clawing my way through mid-level consulting work, translating proposals in tiny conference rooms and learning the nuances of Korean business culture the hard way. No shortcuts, no assumptions, and definitely no arrogance. Which is probably why I sensed something the moment Mark walked in. He didn't knock, didn't smile, just strolled in with that "I'm about to ruin your week" smirk that men in middle management mistake for confidence. "Eva," he said casually, standing way too close to my chair. "Can we talk for a second?" I already knew. My body went still. I stood, collected my folder, the one I'd been guarding like a life raft, and followed him into the glass box of a conference room across the hall. It was empty, sterile, all whiteboards and glass and polished surfaces. No oxygen, just optics. He didn't sit. Of course not. "We've been reviewing things," he said. "Leadership's decided we're going in a new direction for the pitch." I said nothing. I didn't need to. "We've brought in Catherine," he continued. "More executive presence, you know? Big room energy, polished delivery. She'll handle the presentation." I looked at him and said the only word I could muster without snapping. "When?" "This afternoon," he replied like he was telling me the weather. "You've been so helpful prepping everything, truly. But your role is evolving." "Evolving," I repeated, voice flat. "To more internal strategy, frameworks, support functions. Think of this as a demotion." He blinked, didn't deny it, just gave that useless shrug. "We appreciate everything you've done." I smiled then, just enough to confuse him. Then I left. I passed Catherine on my way out. Glossy, blonde, expensive. She smiled. That soft, "you and me are still on the same team" smile. The kind women use when they're too polite to admit they've accepted a stolen seat. I nodded, not angry, because I'd already read the email 2 days ago from Daesung's chief strategy officer. "We're grateful for your clarity and cultural intelligence. If you ever consider working directly with us, please don't hesitate." At the time, I hadn't answered. It felt too bold, too uncertain. But now I knew exactly what I needed to do. 6 hours later, the boardroom was packed. Mark stood at the head of the table, trying to look like the man in charge. Catherine was flipping through my slides like she'd written them. Her posture perfect. Her tone rehearsed. Daesung's executives were polite, but still, watching, waiting. That's when I opened the door. Every head turned. I wasn't in business casual anymore. I wore navy, clean, sharp lines, a language all its own. I walked in without hesitation, folder in hand. One of the Daesung men whispered something to his colleague. I heard it. I responded, in flawless, unhurried Korean. "My consulting fee is now 15%. I work for you. Let's begin." The tension cracked. One of the executives smiled. "Mark?" He didn't move, couldn't speak. Catherine just stared at me like the floor had dropped out beneath her heels. And me? I took the seat at the table, the one they tried to give away. No one said a word after I spoke. The silence stretched. Thick, uneasy. like the air had changed density. Then Daesung's lead negotiator, Mr. Kwan, gave a slow nod and leaned back in his seat. His expression didn't break, but I saw it. That flicker. Recognition. Not just of me, but of what this moment meant. They knew what Mark didn't. They knew I wasn't just someone who could recite numbers in Korean. I was someone who understood what not to say, when to pause, when to bow slightly deeper, when to hold eye contact just long enough to show respect, but not long enough to challenge it. Mark cleared his throat and took one awkward step toward the screen. "Well," he said, voice a little too loud. "Looks like we have a bit of a miscommunication." I didn't let him finish. Still calm, still seated, I looked directly at Mr. Kwan and said in Korean, "Please forgive the confusion. The team structure has recently changed, but I'm still responsible for the core integration strategy." One of the Daesung team members translated quietly for those who didn't speak Korean. I could tell from the murmurs that it landed the right way. Mark looked at Catherine. Catherine looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. I gave them one glance. Just one. Then turned back to the people who actually mattered. I spent the next 45 minutes doing the presentation I wasn't supposed to give. Slide by slide, walking them through the financial projections, the regulatory roadmap, the localization strategy. When they asked questions, I answered in Korean. Not because I wanted to show off, but because it was efficient, clear, human. That's what business was supposed to be. Not theater, not flash. Just understanding, mutual ground, shared gain. And somewhere around slide 11, I saw it happen. Daesung shifted. They stopped listening like a client being pitched and started responding like a partner being heard. After the meeting, I thanked them in Korean, bowed, and left first, leaving Mark and Catherine blinking behind me. I didn't look back. I went straight to the elevator, my heels echoing through the hallway, adrenaline burning in my chest like a secret I hadn't let out yet. I didn't go back to my desk. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of the building and got in the car I had called 30 minutes before the presentation began. Destination, the Daesung Hotel Suite. Yes, they'd invited me. 2 hours earlier, Mr. Kwan was already there when I arrived. He didn't waste time. "We'd like to work with you directly," he said. Not, "we're considering." Not maybe, just, "We'd like to." I let that sit for a second. Then asked, "Would it be structured through a contract with Daesung's US branch?" He shook his head. "We'd prefer to engage you as an external consultant through a third-party firm. Less politics, more control." I already knew the answer. I'd already bought the domain name. The LLC was filed 2 nights ago. "RC Advisory," I said. "Singapore-based. Clean, lean, discreet." He smiled. "We don't need flashy," he said. "We need fluent." After I left the hotel, I walked for a long time. Through the financial district, past the glass towers and startup banners, past the manicured plazas and overpriced coffee carts. I was calm, but I wasn't relaxed, because I knew what was coming next. The moment the news reached Mark, he'd react. He'd panic. He'd try to control the narrative like always, spin it into a leadership transition or strategic misalignment. He'd never admit he'd just fired the one person who could close the biggest deal his company had ever chased. And Catherine? She was just collateral. She'd be thrown under the bus the moment she became inconvenient. But me? I was already building something outside their reach. By the time I got home that night, I had 3 emails. 1. From Daesung's legal team, requesting contract terms. 2. From an executive at a Singapore logistics firm I'd met once at a summit, asking if I was open to independent advisory work. 3rd, and from Mark. Subject line, "We need to talk." I didn't open it. I just smiled, powered up my laptop, and opened the blank contract template I'd saved under the folder. RC Global Deals, Daesung Pitch, Phase 1. I adjusted the title, changed the fee structure to 15% plus success bonus, and added one note at the bottom. All communications will go through RC Advisory effective immediately. Then I hit send. By morning, Mark had left 4 voicemails. The first was cheerful. Too cheerful. "Hey, Eva, crazy day yesterday, huh? Let's connect. I think there's a way to smooth this out." The second had undertones of urgency. "Just looping back. There's some confusion with Daesung. Looks like they're trying to go around formal channels. Let's hop on a call. Today, if possible." The third? That one had a tremble under the surface. "Eva, legal says Daesung sent over a draft contract with RC Advisory? What is that? Let's talk. ASAP." The fourth was short. "Call me, now." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sat in the quiet corner of a rooftop cafe in Singapore, watching the sun climb over the skyline like it didn't care about corporate power struggles. I sipped my coffee and drafted the onboarding documents for Daesung, outlined the payment schedule, project scope, and transition strategy. By 9 a.m., they had countersigned. RC Advisory had its first official client. 2 hours later, the chaos at Orbis Tech began to show. Jenna messaged me privately. "Hey, just wanted to say I saw what happened. It was wrong. Catherine's freaking out. Mark's in the war room. No one knows what's going on." I didn't reply, but I bookmarked it. At 11:17 a.m., I received a WeChat message from Mr. Lee, a former client from our Singapore expansion project. "We heard you may be working independently now. Can we schedule a conversation?" By noon, I had 3 exploratory calls booked. 2 in Seoul, 1 in Tokyo. I wasn't hunting them. They were coming to me. That afternoon, I got the email I was expecting. Subject: confidential, immediate action required from Orbis Tech Legal. CC, Mark Hastings. Attachment: NDA, non-compete, draft. The attached letter claimed I was in breach of contract for engaging with former clients. They used words like intellectual property, internal knowledge, and my favorite, company loyalty. I didn't even finish reading it before forwarding it to my attorney with the subject line, "The clowns are juggling." Within an hour, she responded with a single line. "They never finalized your exit paperwork. There's no NDA, no non-compete, and we have proof they knew it." I'd always been thorough, painfully so. 6 weeks before Mark fired me, I'd requested a title clarification after he restructured my role. I had emailed HR, followed up 3 times, all logged, all time-stamped. The final thread? A casual Slack message from Mark himself. "Let's not waste legal's time on Eva's paperwork. Just cut her access. Efficiency, he'd called it. I called it evidence." By 3 p.m., Orbis Tech stock took a small dip. Just 2%, but sharp enough to be noticed. Daesung had quietly canceled 2 internal meetings scheduled with Orbis. No explanation, just vanished from the calendar. Catherine was still sending follow-ups, still trying to secure the next call, still pretending the deck she didn't write was going to hold the deal together. I imagined her watching the read receipts sit unread, then disappear. That night, I got a call from Martin. He was one of Orbis's early angel investors. Older, sharp, the kind of man who speaks in balance sheets and boardroom whispers. He didn't ask how I was. He just said, "I've been hearing your name in places Mark can't reach." I said nothing. He continued, "There's an ethics committee meeting next week. A few of us want to know what really happened in that boardroom." I paused. Let the silence stretch. Then I said, "If the purpose is truth, I'll be there." He didn't thank me. He didn't need to. We understood each other. I closed the call and opened my laptop. A new message had come in. This one from a Tokyo-based AI firm. We'd crossed paths at a summit 2 years ago, back when I was still being introduced as Eva from operations. Now the email just said, "We heard about RC. Let's talk." I started drafting a proposal. Halfway through, I stopped. Not because I was tired, but because I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about air. After years of squeezing myself into rooms where I had to prove I belonged, explain my value, justify my voice, I didn't need to do that anymore. They gave me the exit I never had the nerve to take. And now I was building, through every door they thought they had locked. The first client didn't make a scene. They just stopped responding. Daesung sent a formal disengagement letter to Orbis Tech 2 days after the meeting. No explanation, no emotion, just a polite line about redirected strategic priorities and a signature at the bottom. Mark didn't say anything publicly. He couldn't, because if he did, he'd have to explain how they lost their biggest APAC deal, and why the client was now working with a boutique consulting firm they'd never heard of until this week. He probably assumed Daesung would come crawling back. He didn't realize they were already in a kickoff call with me. The second client wasn't even mine originally. It was a legacy account I'd only consulted on once, back when I was still just support. But I had remembered something from a conversation over lunch 2 years ago, a pain point they'd mentioned about cross-border compliance automation. So I sent a white paper. Nothing aggressive, no solicitation, just a quiet email from a personal address. Thought you might find this interesting. Hope all is well. They replied the same day. We've been wondering where you went. Are you available for consulting? I was. Meanwhile, Orbis Tech scrambled. They held emergency syncs. Mark's voice was everywhere, peppered across emails, video calls, internal memos. Trying to get ahead of the narrative. Trying to plug holes in a ship he hadn't noticed was already below the waterline. He launched a new deck, hired a freelance Mandarin interpreter who mispronounced half her phrases on the first call, assigned a junior project manager to regain traction with clients who'd already quietly looped me in. The team? They were unraveling. Slack channels went dark. Mid-tier managers didn't know who to report to anymore. One junior analyst messaged me anonymously. They're acting like you never existed, but everyone's talking. I didn't poach. I didn't advertise. I simply listened. One by one, the clients reached out. A German logistics firm wanted a review of their AI compliance pipeline. A Japanese telecom team asked if I was available for quiet guidance. A Korean investor sent a message that simply read, I trust you. I kept everything lean. Secure. No office. No website beyond a single page that said, RC Advisory, Fluent Strategy, Quiet Strength. Every email came from a burner account. Every invoice routed through encrypted channels. My assistant handled admin from a co-working space in Jakarta. My legal was Singapore-based and 5 steps ahead of Orbis Tech's reaction time. We were invisible, and that made us dangerous. Inside Orbis, things got louder. Mark tried to spin the narrative during an investor briefing. Strategic restructuring, he said, voice too rehearsed. Some accounts were reevaluated. New leadership is taking us forward. But questions came fast. Why had 3 core APAC clients disengaged? Why were contracts being frozen? Where was Catherine? And the best one. Why is our biggest former client's new advisor an ex-employee you fired without a finalized contract? Mark blinked, stuttered, blamed operational missteps. But the room had already turned. Shareholders don't care about apologies. They care about erosion. And they could feel it. I watched the live transcription on mute from my apartment in Seoul. I didn't smile. I just saved the transcript for later. That night, my assistant forwarded me a message marked urgent from inside Orbis, a junior compliance officer, anonymous. The subject line, they're coming after you. In it, she wrote that legal was drafting a retroactive non-compete, trying to label my client work as sabotage, backdating memos, coordinating with PR to prepare a rogue contractor narrative. I read it slowly, then reread it, and then I laughed. Not because I was amused, because it was so predictable. Mark had never believed in preparation, only in perception. But me? I had screenshots, Slack threads, time-stamped emails, internal compliance requests asking for clarity on my title months before he fired me. And then the cherry on top, a message from Mark himself, 2 days before the Daesung meeting. Don't loop legal. Let's just handle Eva's exit informally. No need for drama. That line was going to sing in Discovery. By the end of the week, 4 more clients had ghosted Orbis Tech. Mark held a closed-door session with legal. HR followed. Then the board. The walls were closing in. And all I had to do was nothing. Because when you build something from the ground up, you don't need to tear it down. You just stop holding it up. It dropped at 7:03 a.m., Singapore time. The headline was sharp, cold, surgical. Implosion at Orbis Tech. Exposé reveals corporate missteps, lost clients, and a consultant's quiet coup. Byline. Natalie Ho, Business Weekly. 10,000 words, emails, memos, timeline, receipts. There was even a section labeled "The Boardroom Firing Heard Around the World." That's what they were calling it now. My firing. A photo of me walking calmly out of Orbis HQ had already started trending on LinkedIn, captioned by someone I'd never met. She didn't burn the building. She removed the foundation and watched it fall. I didn't post about it. Didn't comment. Didn't share. I didn't need to. By noon, 3 more companies had reached out. 2 wanted consulting retainers. 1 wanted to discuss a potential acquisition of RC Advisory. I said no to the acquisition. I wasn't building something to sell. Not yet. Mark, meanwhile, was unraveling. His name started disappearing from internal press releases. Then came the shareholder meeting. I wasn't there, of course, but Martin was. He'd flown from New York to sit in the front row with a hard copy of the exposé folded neatly in his hand. Mark opened the meeting like a drowning man, asking everyone to stop looking at the water. "There's been a lot of speculation," he said, "but we remain committed to excellence." Someone interrupted from the back of the room. "You mean Rebecca Chang?" He froze. The room didn't. Martin stood and handed a folder to the general counsel. Inside were emails, termination details, missing NDA forms, internal approvals that never happened. Then he said the one sentence that nailed the coffin shut. "You fired the architect of your Asia strategy without paperwork, protection, or process, and now you're blaming her for surviving it." No one defended Mark, because they couldn't, because everything they'd built had rested on me, and they knew it now. That night, I sat alone on a balcony overlooking the Marina Bay skyline. The city buzzed below like it always did. Confident, messy, alive. I had no title, no office, no corporate card. But I had something better. Clients, trust, leverage. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from my assistant. Daesung finalized the new agreement. Japan Telecom followed. And the Singapore contract came in. Total projected value. $61 million over 3 years. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then typed, "Begin onboarding. Quiet rollout only. No announcements." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. No fireworks, no press tour, no revenge arc. Just forward momentum. The next morning, Orbis Tech issued their official statement. "We thank Rebecca Chang for her contributions and wish her well in future endeavors." No apology, no correction, just a generic line buried beneath a paragraph of corporate smoke. That was fine, because I wasn't waiting for them to validate me. They had already given me everything I needed. Freedom, proof, and an exit door they never thought I'd use. Later that week, I flew to Tokyo for a private meeting with one of Daesung's regional partners. We met in a quiet conference room on the 27th floor of a glass tower. Minimalist decor, white tea, no slides. The executive greeted me with a bow, then said in flawless Korean, "You were always the reason we stayed with Orbis. We just didn't realize how replaceable they were until you left." I bowed back, then laid the redlined proposal on the table. Clean, streamlined, already translated. Afterward, I took a walk through a small alleyway market, bought a sweet rice cake from a vendor who didn't recognize me, and sat beneath a cherry blossom tree that was starting to bloom early. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt true. I'd spent years trying to prove I deserved a seat at someone else's table. Now, I was building the table, choosing who got to sit. I didn't burn Orbis Tech to the ground. I just let them watch while I reclaimed everything they thought I couldn't survive without. Client by client, contract by contract, no PR campaign, no revenge press, just results. Because when you speak the language no one bothered to learn, when you build the bridge and become the bridge, they can't fire you. They can only watch as you walk away and never come back.